Like, we're always taught that. But again, it just reminded me in almost like a physical sense of that feeling of not being good enough, not ever being able to cut it, to live up to it.
You didn't fully embrace the Reformed tradition that you were a part of.
And then
if you had, you would have
Yeah.
been like, I do my part, and then God does the important part.
Yeah.
That's all I can do.
I would say that I believe that, and that
I did believe that, so I guess I didn't have as much strife about it, because I'd be like, well, God doesn't regenerate this person, and that's God's issue.
ultimately that's where he goes in this chapter, is talking about how it's a spiritual response that can, a conversion is a spiritual response that can only be, it originates with God. So if you don't, if someone that you care about, or a stranger on the beach, or anyone in between, doesn't respond, and they just don't believe, some people just don't believe because they're not chosen by God to believe. Because if God really wants, because he ends up describing, the way that he ends it is, if you're really concerned that you might not have a saving faith, this is how the whole chapter ends. It's like, well, if you're concerned about it, that means that God has made you concerned about it, so you don't need to be concerned about it anymore. You're definitely saved. I actually never struggled with, like, was I actually saved? Because I felt like struggling with that meant my faith was not strong enough. So I would never admit to myself that I ever questioned whether I was saved, because a strong faith would never do that. So it was just my way of thinking and the way that I interacted with the whole system. It's like I feel like I'm willing to admit, and every time I talk about this, I kind of go back to this point of like, yeah, a lot of what I brought to the table, like my experience, my genetics, my environment, everything about my past, builds me to react to this evangelical system in a way that, regardless of how much you talk about grace and love, I'm still going to beat myself up. That's just the fact of the matter. That's exactly how it went. And then it was just a reminder, like, this totally brought it all back and kind of triggered all of it.
Well, one of the things that makes that difficult because my wife is she's a different personality than you, but
we relate in a lot in this way.
But she is,
as we talk,
she suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder, specifically scrupulosity, which is a type of OCD in which, if you're a religious person of faith, you can kind of turn it into overdrive, where you're basically trying to be the best possible Christian that you can be. And it's interesting when you're in especially, she was raised in.
You may not be washing your hands.
She kind of does that. She does that a little bit too.
But you feel like you got to wash your spirit.
Yeah.
Your conscience.
And she went to a Baptist Christian school where they said things like, you're 99.9% sure that you're saved, you're 100% lost. Now, they would never have said that at a Reformed institution, which we ended up kind of going to essentially a Reformed church, right? Mm-hmm. And so that helped somewhat. But the thing is that the Bible, and also just Christian teaching and Christian culture in general, the idea of grace through faith and it being a gift from God, and this being basically 100% God's responsibility, and you're just basically responding. You're actually not, if you're truly reformed, you're not even responding. You're responding to determined by God. It actually doesn't quite jive with the idea of all the responsibilities, because if you just look at what Jesus had to say, Jesus is talking about a lot of stuff that we should be doing. Not everybody who says, Lord, Lord, will be saved, but only those who do the will of my Father. The Reformed tradition takes that and says, this means that it's not about works. When another way to read that is Jesus saying, no, actually, it kind of, what you do is sort of important.
Well,
Regardless of your theology, your personality is going to latch onto the obligation and the shame that sort of permeates the whole way of thinking.
by the way, there's at least part of what I'm saying that is kind of like, you know what, it's my fault. And so I hear myself saying that, and I'm like, you know what, I don't know if I want to just accept that. So, you know, because I'm not comfortable like placing blame and like talking bad about anybody or the church, you know, coming after anybody, when my tendency always is to say, okay, yeah, this is on me. This is on me. And these are the things that I'm deconstructing, and a lot of it is belief by belief. Like very early on, it was deconstructing the belief that if I left the church, even if Christy didn't, our marriage would not survive. We've already talked about that. But you know, recently, the teaching has been ringing in my ears where Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for what? A rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Because on the last episode...
Oh, you're rich? Are you on the Forbes list?
I'm on the Forbes list.
Are you above or below Ryan the 9?
I'm below him. But
he might be 10 now.
Right. So I think we're above him now. But there's another kid above us.
Oh, crap.
Yeah. I think it's a younger girl.
How easy is it for a rich kid to enter the kingdom of God?
A kid can go through the eye of a needle easier than a camel.
The older you get, though, the bigger you get, typically. Yeah. Unless you're Benjamin Button.
Benjamin
Button can get right through that damn needle.
Eventually.
Yeah, it takes a while, though.
You talk about privilege, the privilege that we have, and so when I say things last week, when I say things like, I have to, and
you're rich,
and it's like, well, because I'm rich, and am I blinded to, like, because I believe that, I believe the teaching is like, if you're rich, you think you've got everything you want, so you're missing out on what you really need. Not only salvation, but like an active, dynamic relationship with God through Jesus. That's what we were taught to believe. And so I found myself even wrestling with that over the past couple of weeks. It's like, am I lying to myself just because I'm well off? Is it easy for me to be happy for that reason? So it's a belief that's always been there that then I have to pick up and I have to look at, and I have to dismantle it, or see if maybe I'm wrong about it. You know, because I hear that voice saying,
हेलो
रेना
या
बेटा मैं ये सोच रही हूँ कि अगर आप मॉल से हो के आ जाओ तो हम 6 बजे इकट्ठे चले जाएंगे. It won't take that long for you. आप जैसे अपनी दवाई पिक करो, मॉल का चक्कर मार आओ. बेटा अभी तो 3 बजे हैं, तो हम 6 o'clock घर से इकट्ठे दोनों चले जाएंगे.
So we can do that, but just leave at 4.
नहीं बेटा, लेकिन मैंने तो अपनी गाड़ी लेके जानी है ना.
What?
बेटा मैंने अपनी गाड़ी भी तो लेके जानी है ना.
So either way you have to do that.
हाँ.
I don't understand what you're saying.
नहीं, मैं ये कह रही हूँ कि अगर आप थोड़ी देर अभी प्ले करो, that's okay. half hour में आप जाओ, आप तो रेडी हो, आपके कपड़े भी रेडी पड़े, तो आप जाके अपनी दवाई पिक करो, मॉल का चक्कर मार के घर वापस आ जाओ, फिर हम अपनी गाड़ी लेके खाला की तरफ चले जाएंगे. आप खाना खाना.
Mama, I don't want to go there right now because it's just too much.
बेटा इतना टू मच. वो आपने, मैं वैसे ही सोच रही थी, मेरा बच्चा कोई ऐसा तो नहीं है. मैं चाहती हूँ कि अगर आप मतलब खाना खा के उधर से ही तो आप आगे जाते हो, अगर आपका प्लान बनता है तो. मैंने तो अभी वैसे ही एक
Mom, if I go to the mall, I'm also in that direction, but it's like
it's easier for you.
Yeah.
चलो बेटा फिर ठीक है. मैं तो बेटा वैसे ही सोचती हूँ, आपको पता है मैं अल्टरनेटिव सोचती रहती हूँ ना. That's my job in my everything. If that's easier for you, that's fine. ठीक है चलो, आप खेलो तो खेलो. मैं अपने बाल बनाती हूँ. ओके बेटा.
My former self, you know? Okay, maybe it's not my former self. Maybe it's Jesus. Maybe it's the Jesus that I had a relationship with. That's what I always heard from him. You know, it's kind of like you don't hear the thousands of positive comments, you only hear the negative ones. It's a human tendency. Even in this chapter, he talked about something else that kind of, I guess, triggered this again. When Jesus is telling the story of the rich man who's burning in hell. Okay, this is Luke 16. If you're following along in Red Study Bible, Luke 16, 19 through 31. So the rich man's burning in hell, but he's looking across the chasm at Abraham, and he's able to talk to him. Is he in the bosom? Bosom's not mentioned here. The rich man said, "Then I beg you, Father," talking to Abraham, to send him, talking about Lazarus, like another guy. Send him to my father's house, where I got 5 brothers who live, so that he may warn them, lest they also come into this place of torment. Like, I got 5 brothers, just raise him from the dead, send him over there, tell him that, like, I'm burning in hell, they don't need to come here. This is the rich man. You see what I'm saying? And he said,
what if smartphones were more than just with our most advanced and intuitive smartphone camera yet? It truly sees you, not at your face. It makes motion silky smooth. And for things you don't want to see, it removes them instantly with Magic Eraser. Pixel 6 is the highest rated phone for security, and has 24-hour adaptive battery that sends power precisely where you need it. Live Translate speaks your language and hers, however you speak it. Pixel 6 even adapts to match your style. It's the phone that understands we're all different. Google Pixel 6. For all you are.
Since joining Get Upside this month, I've already earned over $20, and that's just from getting gas. I'm getting cash back every time I pump. On the app, select the gas station that you want, and it'll tell you how much you'll get back. So that could be anywhere from about 10 to 25 cents per gas.
but Abraham said, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. So they have all the truth they need. He said, no, if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. They'll change their mind. And then he said, Abraham said, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, then rise from the dead. Of course, so it's, and it the first thing that I feel, even reading this 2 days ago, is still all of that teaching just wells up inside of me. It's like, yeah, you're gonna be burned in hell. You don't even believe in hell, but you're gonna be burned in hell one day, and you're gonna because you're a rich man who lied to yourself. It's like I I don't lay awake at night thinking these things, but that's why I'm saying I was triggered in so many ways, because it brings up all these things that like, these lies.
You think about the whole idea of being rich, right? It's like we actually can quantify how wealth directly influences happiness, because not from a spiritual standpoint or not from reading the Bible, but from science, right? Like they've actually done a lot of research on this. And they have found that up to a certain point, yes, more money does bring you more happiness. But above a certain point,
Right.
it levels out. And most people have the ability, or regardless of the circumstances, they have a baseline of happiness that they return to once their circumstances sort of level out, once a transitional period sort of stops happening, right? And so the fact is that, you know what? The fact that you and I don't have to worry about, is there going to be enough money? That is a thing that took up a lot of space in our mind for most of our 20s when we were on staff at Crusade and we were raising support. We're asking people for money. We're getting to places where it's like, am I going to have to ask my family for money in order to pay the grocery bill? Like, we were in that place for a long time, right?
And for me, that fear goes much deeper into my psyche too.
Yeah. So you're not ever going to lose
to feel relief by not having to worry about money in the same way is like something that then I'm like, should I feel guilty for this? It's a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, but the point I'm really making is that, yeah, you probably are feeling a little bit of relief and happiness because of your financial situation. But you know what? Like, there's another end of that. You get to a certain place where all of a sudden finances become a burden in a different way, because you're helping people out, you're trying to figure out what to do with it, whatever.
And I'm not saying that I am happy because I'm rich. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that,
but I get scared that
there's an element of it that's just a natural phenomenon based on the way the human mind works. And so you don't necessarily have to go beyond that to over spiritualize that particular aspect of your life.
Yeah, so it's like to experience relief and happiness, and then for it to immediately be undercut with guilt and shame is a product of a lot of things, including the teaching that I was steeped in my entire life. And that, so I am deconstructing. I mean, the other thing, those things. The other thing is, I mean, coming out of the pandemic and the specific challenges that we went through as a family, I am experiencing the relief of things leveling out. We're in a period where things are, we're not devoid of personal challenges. Don't get me wrong, and you know that. But they're of a different flavor, and it's kind of like it's settled down. So it's not a spike. It's a little bit more of a valley. So it's like it is it's a time when I can take a breath. So I'm on this trip, and I'm taking more of a breath, and that's also a reason why I'm realizing that I'm happy, because I'm at this season of life, or this little phase where, maybe there's another storm around the corner, but I'm not in a downpour. But again, for that to be undercut is telling. Another thing, and I'll segue into like therapy update here, which is another huge part of my spiritual journey right now, is I guess the last time at this table we talked about therapy, we were talking about how I basically came to the conclusion that I needed to switch therapists. I needed to find a new therapist. Well, I did. With the help of Christy's therapist, and the conversation we had then, and then subsequent conversations like you and I had, it was like very helpful to kind of really get me to work on that, Christy did a lot of the top of the year. You're gonna go for this. You're not gonna languish or be in this limbo. It could be 6 months. You don't just meet with somebody. It may not be the right person. And so I've been meeting with new therapists for actually tonight. I think will be our 6th meeting. And it's going really good. And it's totally different than therapy was before. And a lot of that is like with everything that I was going through and all of the acute issues that, like a bunch of fires that needed to be put out. There were a bunch of torrential downpours. I'm mixing metaphors here. But, well, a lot of
Downpours can put out fires. But you want rain when there's wildfires.
But then it turns into a mudslide and it destroys your entire home. That's what it felt like for a while. One thing's gonna help, no, it's gonna make things worse, kind of a thing. And so therapy was really helpful, but it was more of that like acute survival, get through it, as I think I talked about last night. But now I was able to set the stage with this new therapist and say, you know what, I want to move into a new phase. These are the things, and I kind of like shared some of the complaints I had with how my frustration with therapy before, and saying, hey, it's only my first therapist. This is what I'm looking for. If this isn't you, let me know. So like on our first phone call, like the pre-interview thing, like I kind of just laid all that out there. And I'm glad I did, because he was able to respond and say, okay, well, I'm different in this way. You want something that's more conversational. I get you want something that's still a little more relational. And then he also talked about his therapeutic approach and how it was different. And I talked about my spiritual background, and he had a specific point of view on that. He had experience. He had a point of reference for the evangelical church, and dealing with shame. Like that was something that he's spent a lot of time with. So I was like, okay, this could really work, especially because I've said that I want to go deeper. I want to start tackling these issues. And so I think a lot of the conversation that I'm having here, it sounds like I'm just being hit with stuff, like when driving my van or when I'm reading this and being triggered. But I do think I'm able to talk about it and make more sense of it just based on the last 5 sessions, the first 5 sessions I've had in therapy, because it's been much more pointed in that direction of relating it to my experience in the church and my deconstruction. Continual deconstruction. Like when I talk about the camel going through the eye of the needle, that's something that came up in therapy that like surprised me. But it was just and there was a realization that that's another. So wow, I am really still just deconstructing, because I kind of put a pause on that for almost the past 2 years in a lot of ways. At least like a pointed, I'm going to dig into my past in different ways and then really see what applications are there, how I can grow, and what lessons I can learn. So I'm really encouraged.
You know, and one thing real quick there too, we did talk about with the eye of the needle thing.
Yeah.
Is, which I'd be willing to guess Jesus did. And I'm not saying Jesus only says the things that you want him to say, and I don't, there's more to it than that. But, you know, when Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven, most of the time, or all of the time, it seemed like he was talking about something that was present, right? That was present now, that was present on earth, that he was inviting you into something, right? He was inviting you into a new way of thinking, a new way of living. And I think that the point to that story, to that parable, or the saying, or whatever it is, I think both of us would agree, it's like, money is a distraction, right? And it can be something that makes it more difficult for you to be present and enter into life in a meaningful, fruitful way. Because our natural instinct is to collect and hoard and get worried about that, protect that. And it's not a very spiritual mindset. That's not a Christian idea. That's a sort of broadly spiritual idea that you're going to find in Islam, you're going to find in Buddhism, you're going to find in Hinduism. This idea that money can be a distraction to those things, right? And so, again, the old evangelical voice, we always read that as riches are going to make it difficult to enter the kingdom of heaven, heaven being the afterlife. Not that, a rich man doesn't get in, but like somebody who's putting their riches over their relationship with Jesus, or, you know what I'm saying? But you can, there is a way to approach that with a free mindset where you can actually take what the wisdom that's there without letting the guilt seep in.
Yeah.
Shame seep in, you know?
And I'll give a different example so we're not just harping on the rich. Since I was so close to the end of this book, I skipped the last chapter, which is the one about Jesus. The one who changed everything for me, but I skipped it. And then it was just ads for other books that the Gospel Coalition had. Oh, nice. And they got like the picture of the book is called Taming the Tongue.
What the fuck is that about?
How the Gospel Transforms Our Talk by Jeff Robinson. And then Nancy Guthrie, who's an author and Bible teacher, gave an endorsement. And there's
no cursing in her endorsement.
This book hit home with me, perhaps, and she describes her experience reading this book. This is a endorsement in the back of this book, okay?
If you're in pain or have other health problems and are in or near Howard County, Maryland, I'd like to personally invite you into our office for a complimentary consultation because chances are we can help. I'm Dr. Steve Silverston here at World Class Chiropractic, located in Ellicott City, Maryland. For over 20 years, we've served Howard County and surrounding areas, and we've helped.
Well, listen, you got to take every advantage. I mean, listen, we know about ads.
But listen to her experience, though. And see if it's like mine. This book hit home with me, perhaps because some of my greatest regrets have come from ways I've misused words, confidences I didn't keep, criticism I was too eager to offer, bragging to make myself seem important, dominating the conversation when I should have listened. I've also misused words by keeping silent when I should have come clean, when I should have offered praise, when I should have spoken up. These and many more insights on how I am. These and many more insights on how we use our words are covered in this brief but wisdom-filled book. A great book to read prayerfully on your own, but even better to use to discuss with a small group so you can air out how you are in a small group setting. It's like, this is the stuff that I would eat up. It's like, now I gotta tame the tongue. Yeah, it's like, I'm doing all these things, I'm criticizing, I'm bragging, I'm also not saying things. I'm keeping silent when I should come clean. I should be offering praise. I'm so glad that I don't have to read more of that book. I'm so glad that I can.
Are you saying that those ideas are not important? Are you saying that?
I'm saying that.
I know you're not. I'm playing devil's advocate. I want to know what. Because one way of interpreting what you're saying is
it's
that
eviscerating.
You can just do whatever you want to, and you don't need to.
Yeah.
You don't have to follow any rules.
That's not my problem.
Right.
That's not my problem.
Exactly.
My problem is being eviscerated by rules. And it turns out I'm a pretty good person. But I have to keep myself around very frequently. And I think that's bad. But I think that's my work. you know, is not because I believe that it's true, not because it will make me happier. I feel like everything that I've said today anybody who wants to, from the inside, where we used to be, like you said, you would have written chapters in that book, and I would have written off everything that I've said, and everything that I've said last year and the year before, because that's how I was. But I would do it to others because I did it to myself twice as much, and I would get mad that other people weren't doing that to themselves. You know, and it was not a good way. It was not a good life to live for me. It was not. I wasn't thriving.
Well, this is one of the things that people are different, right? And I think that, this has probably gotten better. We haven't been a part of the church for a while, but one of the things that we noticed, especially in college, is that the only distinction that was made between people was men, right? It was like, okay, the men are going to separate and go into this room and talk about a few things, and the women are going to go in this room and they're going to talk about a few things. And we'll talk about some stuff together, but like that was the one distinction. But there was very little nuance discussed about people's personalities. Kind of what you're getting at is the fact that whether you call it Enneagram 1 or whether you just call it a person who struggles with shame and guilt, and my wife, in a different way, struggles with it. We have to be sensitive. You know, if I was still in the church, what I would be saying is we got to be sensitive to those people who are natural rule followers and are naturally self-critical. And we don't need to spend a lot of time getting them to understand what the right and the wrong is because it's so built into who they are. We need to be really pouring grace into their lives, right? Whereas you got somebody like me, that's, you know, I kind of need rules, right? Because my tendency is to just decide that they don't apply it. You know what I'm saying? And so when I read her say that, her review of that book, and I see I'm like, yeah, that's true. I need to think about the way that I speak. I need to think about the impact that my words have. I need to think about the impact that the lack of my words have, right? And those are principles that I can apply to myself without a sense of guilt or shame. Just because I'm like, yeah, that's true, and I need to do that, and I don't do that. I don't think there's room for that for us. For us to sort of see things different.
Another update that I'm totally fine to share. I think at a certain point, I didn't know if I was going to be, but I've started anxiety medication.
So that's why you're happy.
Right. So it's like, okay. That was also at the top of the year, you know, under my doctor's care, also talking with my therapist. But started taking Zoloft, well, sertraline. I think it's like the cheaper generic.
I thought you were rich. Why can't you get the real stuff?
It's great. It's the exact same. I'm taking 25 milligrams. I took that for a month, and I had a bunch of negative side effects that I expected. Headaches every day, some nausea. I would take it in the morning because that's when I take my other supplements to smooth it. If I take it at night, I would forget. It wasn't that bad, except for one day I got a migraine. You remember that?
Well, my wife was, you know, who is also medicated in this way. She was talking to you.
She wanted me to take it at night.
She told me the story. She was like, you know, I told Link that the same thing happened to me. And he was like, oh, no, I can't do that. I can do it in the morning. I was like, yeah,
that's when I want to take it.
Don't change his routine.
I would rather be nauseous and have headaches.
That's
my
routine.
Because once I get over it, that's when I need to take it. And going on Reddit, like, whatever you're experiencing in your life, you know, go on Reddit and search it just to have other people who, I mean, this is kind of I think there's danger in this advice. Like in general.
Trigger warning when you send people to Reddit.
I mean, I went to the Zoloft thread, and it was just really helpful to hear people anecdotal account.
If you want to get the unbiased opinion about people's experience with things, a lot of times you get the right Reddit thread, and it will be very helpful.
Yeah, you got to find the right one, and you can't. That's not going above my doctor's care, but it's all very practical stuff. And like you hear like the preponderance of evidence that a lot of people have headaches, so I'm not gonna get freaked out about that. And then I've also noticed that it takes longer to climax. I'm talking about sexually.
But like get to the top of a mountain on a hike.
Yeah, it doesn't affect hiking, but that's not a bad thing.
No, that's a good thing.
It's a good thing because it's just more pleasure for a longer time. Double your pleasure, double your fun, double my dose to 50 milligrams as of yesterday because I want to have sex even longer. No, I'm joking.
Is there a way for me to get just the part of it that helps with that?
Yeah, I think you just shave off the end of the pill.
Oh gosh, I thought what are you going to shave off? I was like, I'm circumcised already, and I don't think that helps.
The reason why I up my dose is because all the side effects basically subsided after 3 weeks, but then it's still kind of hard to tell if because for me it's not. I don't have panic attacks. I've never had a panic attack. I've actually been in denial that I've had, and I spoke about this in the last therapy update. I've been in denial that I've had like a diagnosable anxiety disorder. But, okay, my last therapist said I did. I mean, when you're having heart palpitations, that they're not constant, but they come and go. It's like I've had that for decades. Whenever my stress would get over a certain threshold. So that was, like, that's what went away after.
You're not getting the warning signs of what?
After a couple of weeks. Yeah. Well, palpitation is different. It's just like a flutter. It's not it wouldn't show up as an elevated heart rate. But, and sometimes, like I remember when I worked for IBM, I would lay down on the couch to watch television, and that's when I feel it. When you get still, they're happening, but you only feel it when you feel it when you're still. Or sometimes they wake you up when you're sleeping. But those have gone away, but I think I might be able to benefit from upping the dose, so I'm seeing if there's more benefit there, because that's really the only thing I can point to. And it's really, it hasn't been. It really takes a couple of months for you to really see. So, yeah, I mean, it took, I had to get over this hump of being willing to say that I have a problem that I might need medication for. It was, with Christy and Jesse speaking so openly about it for years and the benefits of it, I was very, I had a very positive outlook on it. But I was just like, but I don't need it. I just, I just am constantly eviscerating myself in my own brain. But that's just my normal. So it took everything kind of coming together to get to this point. But once I got over it, I'm like, okay. When I started having headaches, I actually didn't question it because I feel like it's just an experiment, and it'll either work or it won't. But I'm not going to quit before I find out if it works, and it has already started to work. But like I do have a little bit of a headache right now, and I kind of hate it. I'm not irritable, but I'm like.
Dude, I'm divorced. I live in this van. I'm talking to